Okay, Tim, that was yesterday, you're saying. What have you got in store for us today? Well, we could not be starting with stronger insight. We start with the overall winners of our Business Culture Awards, our reigning champions. And joining me live on stage are Helen Roberts and Patti Turfrey, and they are appearing right now. Now, they are from Wrightington, Wigan and Leigh NHS Foundation Trusts. And how are you, Helen? How are you, Patti?
I'm good, thank you. Nice to see you, albeit virtually.
Exactly. Lovely to see you both.
Thank you for having us.
It's fantastic to have you here. Now, would you mind just introducing yourselves to all of the delegates and explaining the roles that you have within your NHS Foundation Trust? Helen, to you first.
Sure, my name's Helen Roberts. I'm a Business Development Manager at Wrightington, Wigan and Leigh Teaching Hospitals. And I work within the Go Engage team, which is our employee engagement model. And I work with our external partners. And we help them with their engagement journey.
Thanks very much. And Patti?
So my name is Patti Turfrey, and I'm an organisational psychologist within the Go Engage team as well. And my role is to look at the sort of the psychology behind the product. Thank
you. Now, it's been an exceptional year, as I've just been saying, and the focus on the NHS, well, the focus on health services globally, and obviously it's a global conference, and so not everyone who's attending might appreciate the role that the NHS holds sort of within British society. But it was interesting. They were replaying do you remember the opening ceremony from the 2012 Olympic Games, and that celebration of the NHS, which Danny Boyle and his team, put at the heart. And it feels that this year there's been a resurgence, a deeper connection to the role that the NHS and our health provision plays at the heart of society. How's it been within the trust, and we've clapped for carers and a whole different appreciation of the services that your colleagues provide?
Yeah, I mean, it's been quite a hectic 6 months for us, as you can imagine. I mean, Patti and I are not frontline workers, and the job that they've done has been pretty amazing. For us, it's been quite hectic because we were sort of redeployed into different roles for a while, and we're slowly sort of returning back to normal. But it's just been a whirlwind, really, over 6 months. And the job that the NHS frontliners have done, and everybody, has been amazing.
Yeah, I mean, our house, I'm speaking to you from my home, and our house has the heart with the NHS next to it, which my children painted, and to have that celebration of the NHS, and it's been a very curious time, I think, within all our societies. Can you just? I'm just going to take you back, and perhaps we'll come back to the present, shortly. So, would you just describe, because you've the journey that you've been on within the NHS Trust has been an incredible one in terms of what I think most of us would refer to as a turnaround.
Yeah.
That you had some an incredible need, a burning platform, if you like, to make a fundamental change to the culture. So, and we're going back almost to the start of the decade. I mean, this isn't a 6-month project. This is something you identified back in 2011. So, would you just take us through what the situation was in 2011 and what prompted this fundamental need to change your organisational culture?
Sure. So as you say, Tim, it does go back over a decade. So I personally can't take any credit for the work that we've done. But it's been an amazing journey, really, and it is, a continuous one. So just to kind of start at the beginning of the story, as an NHS Trust, we're legally obliged to conduct the NHS's National Staff Survey, which we do annually to measure how our staff are feeling. And NHS England use this data to benchmark each organisation against other NHS trusts and to measure their performance. So back in 2011, our staff survey results for engagement were particularly poor. And in fact, within the 250 NHS trusts in the UK, we were in the bottom 20% for engagement. So we weren't in a particularly great place, and it was clear that we needed some kind of major culture change to rectify the situation. So we suspected that the poor staff engagement levels were having an impact on patient care and patient satisfaction. And in fact, when we looked at the research, there was a direct link between poor staff engagement levels and unhappy staff and the service that we were providing to patients. And this was actually backed up by our own patient harm statistics, which in that particular year were very poor. So, for instance, hospital infection rates, so things like MRSA and C. diff, were an all-time high, as were serious patient falls and harms. So it was obvious that we needed to do something, and there was a direct correlation as well between poor staff engagement levels and the level of sickness and staff attrition. So this in turn was not just having an effect on patient care and satisfaction, but also on our operational costs. So specifically those, associated with recruitment and obviously covering staff when they're absent and ill. So we looked at the data, and rather than concentrating on the things that needed kind of instantly rectifying and needed some work, our CEO decided to concentrate on a complete culture change and obviously staff engagement levels. We also were quite aware that the employees at WWL were not feeling particularly in line with trust values and the organisation, and we felt this equally important as well as their individual job roles. So the idea was to have a complete culture change and to look at staff engagement levels. And the expectation was that as staff engagement levels rise, then so too does our quality of patient care, and obviously we should see a reduction in operational costs. So it became clear really that, like I said, we needed a complete culture change. We were lucky that our CEO at the time and the wider management team were huge advocates for staff engagement. So that was great because, they gave us the resources and the time that was needed to implement this culture change. So the kind of beginning of the journey really was when we employed a lady called Nicole Williams, and she was employed as our head of OD. She's a senior occupational psychologist, and her first task, if you like, was to develop a science-based employee engagement model to use in-house, and this is the model that we called Go Engage. So that was kind of the beginning of our journey and why it came about.
Thank you. There's so much to unpack in what you just said. I mean, for so many of us, working in organisations, the absolute clarity as to why you were going about the work, absolute clarity as the link between the organisational culture, the levels of engagement, and the delivery of service, of care to your patients. What I'm hearing is very, very clear leadership and acknowledgement of what needed to shift, backed up by, as you said, time and resources, and then that understanding to make that appointment and then to build out something which was not off the shelf, but bespoke for your situation and your ambition. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, I think so. And the fact is, you commented, Tim, that the whole sort of engagement and cultural change journey was driven straight from the top, from our CEO and management team, was a massive help, as they were strong advocates.
And what were the main considerations as you planned that cultural change strategy? I mean, so you've got your metrics. This is always one of the areas we all get challenged on. It came up multiple times yesterday. What are the? I know. Before I even look at the questions that will come through, I know someone will immediately say, "Okay, quantitatively, what targets did you set yourselves, and then how did you progress against them?" So let's get into that. What was the strategy, and what targets did you set out?
So when we started, we had 6 main considerations in mind that we wanted to be able to help us with our strategy. So the first one was that we wanted to know how the organisation as a whole was feeling. But as we'd started to do some research into employee engagement, one of the key things that we found was actually that giving your employees a voice and giving them the ability to have influence on engagement also has a massive impact. So that was a real key consideration for us. Also, because there's a lot of psychologists in our team, we wanted it to be a really robust measure of engagement. We wanted to use psychological research. We wanted the theory behind us. We wanted to make sure that we were doing it based on science. We wanted it to be sustainable. We know that engagement isn't just going to stop as soon as you've reached your target. It's always going to be there. We wanted to be able to continuously measure that over time and to track any changes so that we could see what was really having an impact on engagement. Another consideration was we wanted it to be flexible. So we know that things are going to change over time from internal sources, from external sources, whether it's politics, whether it's the economy, whether it's global pandemics. So we wanted an approach that would allow us to sort of deal with this flexibility as well. We wanted to make it as sort of less resource intensive as we could, and also to not have a huge amount of cost for the NHS. So with those considerations in mind, we then started planning, like, how are we going to tackle those considerations? So firstly, to try and understand what engagement was, we developed the employee engagement model, which Helen referenced in previously. But like I said, our sort of main consideration was, is this model valid, and is it robust, and will it be reliable over time? So using the sort of research, the theory, we were making sure that we were really tapping into the actual factors of employee engagement and actually the concepts that they are. We also thought about the fact that we've got a lot of staff and we've got a lot of dispersed staff as well. So in order to be able to capture all of those people, we decided the best way to sort of use this model was to then put it into a survey. So as I mentioned, the psychologists in our team took those concepts and made them into questions. And we used sort of our own organisation to test that model as well. We also partnered with some industry experts so that we could get some sort of second opinions on what we'd come up with. So we worked with an individual called Michael West, who I'm sure probably a lot of people on this call will know of, but he is the sort of leading industry expert of employee engagement in the NHS. And we just wanted to make sure that the concepts that we'd considered from the research literature, is that in reality what's actually happening for NHS staff and also other organisations as well. So by this point we had our sort of model ready, we had our survey questions ready. So we then wanted to, as psychologists do, we wanted to play around with the data and we wanted to test that the model was valid and was robust. So we used our own organisation, we used the data that we were getting to sort of test that out. And after a few iterations, we had our final model ready. So I mentioned earlier that we were trying to make sure that we were not only getting an organisational wide approach, but also looking at the individuals and the teams within the organisation. So at this point, we started thinking about how we could tackle this. And we came up with a two-pronged approach. So the first part of this is we do our organisational wide survey, and we do this as a pulse survey so we can capture how everybody's feeling. But we also then went on to develop a teams programme. So again, the psychologists within our team designed a training package which enables any member of staff throughout the organisation within their teams to cultivate and think about engagement from themselves. So it kind of gives them the information, the tools, the resources to lead employee engagement change from within their teams, rather than having management, kind of saying, you need to go and be engaged. So it gives them the opportunity to really take it forward themselves. And we were really conscious as well that in order to get an engagement change throughout the organisation and to change that culture, we need buy-in from our staff. And we use this Teams programme to really educate everybody around the staff how important engagement is, and how everybody has to take that personal responsibility for it. And if you're not feeling positive about the organisation, you also have the power to change something.
It's so rich what you're describing.
So I also mentioned we wanted to make sure we could. Yeah, there's so much. But we also mentioned we wanted to be able to sustain and track our engagement over time. We also, as I mentioned, we have a lot of staff, so we didn't want to have somebody inputting data all the time, analysing the data. So with this, we developed an online platform that could do all of this for us. So this platform is called Zopa. And what this enables us to do is it enables us to send the surveys. It tracks all the data coming in. It does all the analysis so that we can then interpret the results, and we provide a summary of what we've kind of found as well. So that was an initial cost for us up front, but the time, the resource, and the insight that it's given us has really outweighed that cost for us. And finally, as I mentioned, things happen, global pandemics come along. So we wanted a way to be flexible. So with our survey online tool, our Zopa tool, we also added the ability to add additional questions to the survey, so that if there ever was a specific thing that was causing any issues within the organisation, we can really try and tap into that with our survey and understand exactly what's going on. So, for example, with the COVID pandemic, we used some guidance from the British Psychological Society, which talked about how organisations should be assisting their staff. And again, we turned that into a survey. We asked a few questions alongside our normal survey to understand how, as an organisation, were we looking after our staff? What could we do differently? What could we do? What did we do well? What could we do better? So we've been able to use our survey tool to really hear what it's been like for our staff, and to see if, some of the things that we did that have an impact on engagement as well.
Mm-hmm.
So those were our main considerations.
Okay, so sorry, just to say, I think the delegates are really starting to understand now why you are the overall winners and our reigning champions, because the quality of thought and the depth of the implementation just comes all the way through. If anyone has any questions for Helen and Patti, please pop them into the chat function, because what you're describing here is obviously you've got that real strength of leadership from the top. You've got a very strong distributive leadership approach across the whole organisation, and a real focus on agency. We have, I'm just laughing because I can see the books behind me. There's so much research and writing on leadership, but what you're talking about is the agency that comes with followership. If you're part of this organisation, how do you buy in? How do you take accountability for your own energy, for your own agency, for your own contribution? So it's incredibly rich, and it really demonstrates the deep psychological approach that you've had, which I'm not surprised to hear when you're working with health professionals who want to hear the science behind the approach that you're laying out. So what's been the impact in the organisation itself? What's happening now that didn't happen before?
Well, the short answer is quite a lot.
Okay, next question.
Well, I don't want to repeat too much of what Patti has said, but just to give you a bit more detail. So Patti mentioned the two-prong approach. So there's the organisational survey. So we survey our staff every quarter, but we actually survey a quarter of the workforce across a cross-section of every division. So that gives us a really good chunk of data to deal with and for the psychologist to report on. But it also means that we're constantly up to date with how our staff are feeling and what's happening in the organisation, which is obviously, really, really important. The survey results are available and reported on very quickly. And Patti mentioned the tool that we use to administer our surveys, Zopa. So there's like a three-tier reporting approach, if you like. The first stage is one of the psychologists will personally analyse all the data, and they will put together quite a comprehensive report, which includes an executive summary, and recommendations are kind of made to rectify any issues or any sort of hotspot areas. Zopa also has a dashboard where you can actually do a deep dive into any data that you want to. So, for instance, you could look at any staff group, any grade, and it can be applicable to any organisation, not just an NHS trust. And then there's also a raw data file which gives you all the sort of separate information in the form of an Excel file, basically. So in addition, we also tackle engagement at a local level with the Teams programme, which is basically about recruiting individual teams to come forward and take charge of their own engagement. So they don't need to be teams, for instance, that have been identified in the survey as hotspot areas, tricky teams, teams in trouble. It could be a mixture of teams that are doing well, some that need some help. And it's really about them making their own journey. So we survey a team at the beginning of the programme, and then they're given what we call our toolkit, which, as Patti mentioned, it's a set of interventions and initiatives put together by one of our occupational psychologists. And they then go off and take charge of their own engagement for a 6-month period. And then we survey them again at the end. The Teams programme for us has proved massively successful and popular among staff. I think one thing it does is it makes staff less sceptical, and they believe that we really are trying to do something with the information that we receive back from surveys. It's not just a tick box exercise. So that in turn helps drive up response rates for the organisational survey and the national staff survey. So just to give you some kind of examples, so our quarterly survey, for instance, highlighted quite high negative energy trends within our A&E department. So A&E were basically on the stage of burnout. This is going back to 2011. So early identification of this allowed us to basically put some interventions in place. We could identify what was happening or why sickness levels were so high within the A&E department, and it allowed us to put some resilience training in place for A&E staff. And also to put in place a mindfulness programme. Another example to give you is recognition within the trust. So back in 2011, our scores for recognition were consistently low. And when our psychologists looked at the evidence, intrinsic recognition, which is the small things that you can do, as opposed to grand gestures, are much more appreciated by staff. So to address this, we put in place what we call the Going the Extra Mile scheme. So it's basically a scheme where any member of staff can nominate another member of staff to say thank you, and if they've done something sort of over and above their normal job role, and they get a badge and a card. And it may seem like a small gesture, but it was very much appreciated, and we saw this reflected in the recognition scores during the next survey. So really, for us, by having access to this intelligence, and we're being driven by this data, it's allowed us to obviously improve on the engagement, but also sustain it. Because as we all know, you can't take the foot off the accelerator. It is a continuous journey. So the cultural change and impact that it's had on staff was clear to see, really. So back in 2011, sorry, as I said, we were in the bottom 20% for NHS Trusts in the UK. By 2012/13, we'd managed to move that to the top 5%, which is a massive achievement for us. I mean, we haven't been perfect. We've had a few dips here and there. The latest one was 2018. So there was some talk of a merger within the trust, and there was some industrial action. So we did take a dip in engagement levels, but because we do the survey quarterly, we were very quickly able to identify this, put interventions in place, and then by the following year, when we conducted the national staff survey, our engagement levels had risen above average. So that proves that it can be, sustained along the journey, really. So, like I said, from very early on, things had started to change within the trust. We saw a massive reduction in sickness levels and expenditure on temporary labour. So just to give you some perspective, in 2011, we spent £15 million as a trust on basically the provision of temporary staff, which was mainly due to absenteeism, sickness, etc. We managed to reduce this in 2012 to 12 million. So already we were seeing the operational cost, start to reduce. With regards to patient care, I don't want to sort of bore you with loads of figures, but two examples that really stand out. I mentioned before about hospital acquired infections, so C. diff, MRSA. They actually reduced by 97%, which is a huge figure. Yeah, and equally serious harm cases was reduced overall by 86% during that time. So really, it shaped the way that we do engagement. It shaped our OD team, and it's really sort of ploughed a way forward for us. It also gave us a good sort of business case to grow the OD team, and it also highlighted the need for a dedicated wellbeing team, which we now have in place.
This whole case study is resonating. I just see the questions popping through. So one final question, and I'm going to take it from the floor. So this is from Emma Tucker, and as a number of people are asking. This just sounds absolutely fantastic, and people are asking how you've shared this more broadly outside of your trust, and whether there's the opportunity to see some of the toolkits that you have put in place. So firstly, congratulations, because you've really resonated with everyone here.
Yeah.
And can you just say how has it been shared outside the trust, if it has been so?
Yeah, sure. So as I mentioned, Go Engage was a science-based tool specifically for us to use internally. And over the past sort of 5 or 6 years, we've been approached by several other NHS Trusts who wanted to partner with us and use the model. And it's very much, a collaborative partnership. Our psychologists give them advice. We hold quarterly events where we can kind of all come together, share ideas on engagement. We hear from industry leading experts and speakers, and it's a really good opportunity for us to learn from each other. So we then kind of developed a commercial arm to Go Engage, if you like. The beauty of which is obviously any profit that we make as a trust from partnering with organisations goes straight back into the NHS. So really, over the past sort of year or so, we've had a lot of interest. Excitingly, some of that has come from the private sector. So we've just actually partnered with our first private sector client, which is really exciting. So at the moment, with that in mind, we're working on a new release of the Zopa system. It's got some real sophisticated enhancements, like the ability to create bespoke surveys, and also instant candidate feedback. So that's going to be released within the next couple of months. And our idea really is to just continue on our journey internally, but also to partner and help other organisations along the way. So we've kind of developed different products over the past couple of months, obviously with the pandemic and COVID-19. So we've adapted our survey so that we can get a feel for how our staff are feeling, in reflection of the pandemic. It's something that can be adapted to any organisation. It doesn't need to be an NHS Trust. And then we report on that and put recommendations in place, because obviously we need contingency now for possibility of a second wave, but also to see, our staff through the remainder of the pandemic and obviously the aftermath as well. So that's where we're sort of heading as an organisation.
And if that was of greater interest, you know, Patti and Helen, could delegates reach out to you both and understand more about how you're progressing that work?
Yeah, of course, would be more than happy to speak with them.
Thank you. I think that has really demonstrated why you are our reigning champions, the overall winners of the Business Culture Wars. Just thank you so much. Congratulations on the work that you and your colleagues are engaged with, and for doing such a stunning job. It is difficult to put that amount of work into a 30-minute session, but you have done it wonderfully. So thank you so much for taking the time to prepare to tell that story in such a succinct fashion and to pack so much in. We really appreciate it. Congratulations, and thank you both.
Thanks, Tim. We look forward to the rest of the conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for joining us.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Well, wasn't that absolutely fascinating? Helen and Patti done a brilliant job of kicking off today's conference sessions. Just superb to hear the work that they're doing, not just for the work that they're creating for their own colleagues, but the community in which they work, and how they're then seeking to share their success and insights with other organisations. What a fantastic example of true cultural change.